buckets. It's quite incredible. Depending on the time of year, some children have to walk for up to 2 hours to collect water. Transport all the water in buckets on their heads. When it's the dry season, they will spend all their time just collecting enough water to survive. They transport all the water in buckets on their heads. When it's the dry season, they will spend all their time just collecting enough water to survive.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I can hear Simon. My name is Adrian Brewer, for the benefit of the tape, and that film inspired me to do things which I didn't realise what was happening in Africa. I had been to Africa. I had seen children. I'd seen women carrying water. But like most people who go on a holiday, you accept what goes on around you. One of the analogies is that when you lay on a beach in paradise, for instance, you're often served by somebody, and the cost of the drink that you're drinking is nearly their wages for the week, and you're never aware of that. So what happened was I went to Africa and I saw these children and women carrying water, and I came back completely oblivious and just thinking that that's how life was for everybody. But when I got back, I actually had a motorhome, and in the motorhome there were some water barrels, and I sold my motorhome, and the gentleman who bought my motorhome didn't want my water barrels. He wanted to buy his own. So mine just sat on the patio for a number of years. And I was laying on my settee one day, and the corner of my eye was attracted by something, but I saw the water barrels out of my corner of my eye on my patio, and for some reason I connected them with the women and children in Africa, and that's how Roll Out the Barrel was born. My raison d'etre initially was to, in naivety, was to give everybody a roller barrel. Especially the women. Over the years, I've learned that this is not always a possibility, something you can do with ease. My first experience of getting water barrels to Africa was that I went to Aquarol, and Aquarol were very polite but very firm in saying that they could sell every barrel that they could make, and that they couldn't go less than £40 in those days. It was £40 for an Aquarol. This is an Aquarol. I'm sure you've already seen one. They're quite common. This one's Diner Rod orange because it was taken up Snowdon, Scarfell Pike and Ben Nevis on the Three Peaks Challenge and raised £2,000. So this I struggled for about a year to get this barrel to Africa. My struggle wasn't just getting them there, but my struggle was buying them cheap enough. And initially, bearing in mind, I didn't know anything about Rotary. I wasn't a Rotarian. I knew nothing about fundraising. I'd been in business most of my life. I'm not a millionaire. I never will be, never was. But But what I wanted to do was give some barrels to I was more concerned about the children than because the children where I went to were carrying, they were 3 years old and they were carrying these full of water 4 or 5 times a day back and forth to a single tap. Even in Romania, it was happening. So what I tried to do was I tried to give these barrels to the women and children in Africa. The problem with Africa is it's so big. And I didn't know the scale of the problem. I had no idea what the scale of the problem. I had no idea that 3 billion people have to collect their water every day from not necessarily a tap like you and I, but they have to collect it. Sometimes it's only meters, and sometimes it's miles and miles. I have people in Uganda who are walking at this very minute, but they go in late evening because it's cooler, and they're walking at this very minute to a swamp, basically, and it's 10 kilometers from their house. And what they do is they sleep at the swamp, and in the morning they take the fresh water because they think it's fresher because of the dew, and they bring it back. And when they get back, of course, it's not actually fresh. They don't do it every day, that's because it would be, they've got children to look after, but they do it, and sometimes they do it in relays, and they carry it in containers like this. Now, you've probably seen the pictures of them carrying them on their head. Okay, I can show you. I haven't got a picture here. I have a lady who carries one of these on her head. She makes a little sort of bun thing to put on her head. She puts one of these on the head. She carries one on her back and 2 in a yoke. And she's been doing that, and she's 73, I think she is now, and she's been doing that for ever since she was young. What they tend to do is they teach these young children at 3. And if you look on my website, on my Facebook page, you'll see a little boy there called Joel, and he's 3. And they teach him with a little one. They give him a little one, and as they get bigger, the container gets bigger. That's the trick. So, and then when they get to about 10 and 11, not only do they collect water, but they then have to collect the wood to boil the water to make it drinkable. So, what I really wanted to do was to create a situation where I could get these barrels to Africa. I'm a great believer in coincidence. I'm a great believer in synergy. And one day I was very frustrated, really frustrated, and I couldn't get these barrels off Aquarol for less than £40. I sent 6 to Ghana, which completely disappeared. I never saw them again because I knew nothing about logistics. I knew nothing about corruption. It was just another fantasy. And this chap rang me up from Ellesmere Port, and his name is Bill Leslie, and he is the most dynamic Rotarian I've ever met. And he said, "What you're doing is what I want to do." He said, "And I've been trying to find a way of doing it, and I would like to talk to you." So I drove from the Isle of Wight to his house in Ellesmere Port. That within hours, I was in his house, sitting down and talking to him within 6 hours. And from that point on, Roll Out the Barrel was born. It was born in his lounge and in a structured way. Because what happened is we decided that we would, not only would we find a way of getting these barrels cheap enough so that it would become economic, but we also decided that we would do it through Rotary. And I said, "Well, I'm not a Rotarian." And he said, "You will be in 6 weeks." And I was. It was that easy. He introduced me to a Rotary Club on the Isle of Wight, who I admit, they were not. They're a little traditional. That's putting it nicely. Okay, and so they took me into their fold. But when they found out that I was a bit of a loose cannon in terms of what I wanted to do, I had my own project. I was bringing a project into Rotary rather than working on a project that was already in Rotary. They found me a bit of anathema, and so they weren't able to support me. And I'm not denigrating them. Every club has got a rationale. Some of it's community, some do international, some do nothing, some just have a meal once a week. It's the way it is. So I accepted that. But what we did was I managed to move to another club on the Isle of Wight, which is the one I'm in now, and they're full of people who, again, are not incredibly dynamic in terms of being an international club, but they are very aware of international events, so they will support it. And so Ben and I decided that we would take this barrel to Africa, and we would only give it out to Rotary clubs. So the idea is that we send them to a Rotary club, and the Rotary club distributes the barrel. And that has worked. In 4 years, that has worked, because not one that we know about has ever found its way into a marketplace and been sold by whoever it is. We can almost account, a bit like Shelter Box, we can almost account for every barrel that's ever been purchased by clubs. One of the things that I love about Rotary is not just the fellowship, but the comradeship, if you like. When I go abroad and I stand up and talk for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes, the reception is the same, because it's not about what I'm saying, it's about the fact that I'm a Rotarian. And so they look at me with a different light. There's a degree of automatic trust, right? There's a degree of, they know that it's a humanitarian project. They know that as far as they can see, and I can show them, that no one's making money out of it. Right? What they see is an ideal which can be achieved together. One of the nicest things about working in Rotary is that when I set the charity up, I set it up with Rotarians. Even my first trustees were Rotarians. Alan Berry was a trustee. What happened was, gradually, over the period, we developed a trustee group. We've got only one that's not a trustee, a Rotarian. Mukesh Malhotra is joining me to handle India, because that's quite a big expense. And another thing I found is that I can't do it all on my own, and I have been trying to do it on my own. But every single penny, almost every single penny, with the exception of about £200 or £300 out of 60 or 70, 80,000 pounds, has come from Rotarians. Martin will tell you about the walk over the dome, okay, which we did, and he did it well, against his better judgment, but he did it. I've got a picture of him, and he's flying like this, like Superman. I'll put it on the website. And so what we've done is we're looking to raise awareness. One of the mistakes I've made in the last years when I talk to Rotary clubs is I always say to them, I'm not after your money. What I want you to do is tell people about the project. And the downside of that is that some don't give me any money. So I've stopped saying that. So, and one of the nice things is that I have a number of clubs who support this project, and they make it their charity, or they do a special event or whatever it is to create awareness. Coming back to where we are in Africa, I started off with Ghana, and I lost the barrels completely. When I met Bill, he knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody else. You know the way it works. And our first 100 barrels went to Kenya. Uganda. I will tell you, I'm not anecdotal normally, but I will be anecdotal in this case. His name was Peter, and he was a reverend with a church in Ellesmere Port, and he was a member of the Rotary Club of Ellesmere Port. And he had a project in Uganda. And so we sent 112 barrels there, almost as an experiment, to see if they would get there. Not only did they get there, we worked with a group called NPAC, which is the National Police AIDS Convoy, and it's an ex-policeman who's put his life and soul into running a charity. And what he does is it's about logistics. He can get containers into villages that I can't even touch, and he can do it in such a way that we don't end up paying graft or corruption money or whatever. So we teamed up with him, and he took our first barrels into Uganda for us. And Peter took them to a place called Kamatuza. And now I didn't have any money. So the Rotary Club of Billericay, Alan, rang me up and said, we love your project. We'd like to finance your first 100 barrels. So I went to Billericay, and I stood there, as you do, with a cheque and all the other stuff. And I was a little overawed because there were 75 members of this club. And I was a little overawed because it was really my first sojourn into talking to a lot of people about this project. And but what happened was we sent the barrels to the Kamatuza, to this school. They were sent to the school, and the trick was that we gave the barrels to the children, and they took the barrels away from school. And if they wanted water, they had to come to school to get it. A bit like Mary's Meals, because the tap or the well was actually at the school. And of course, the problem was now that we've got all these children who are coming to school who weren't before. And so what happened was Billericay then financed a toilet block because there was no toilet block. So we solved killed two birds with one stone. So that was our first sojourn into Africa. Since then, I've done 13 countries. We're in Malawi, we're in Sierra Leone, we're in Senegal, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zanzibar. We sent 20 to Rwanda. Dr. John Phillips, some of you may know him. He does a project with the albino people in Lake Victoria, so we sent some to them. We did a big project in South Africa, which was, unbeknown to me, I didn't know there was a serious problem, but there's a place called Ingavana, which is 600 miles north of Durban. And to get them into to South Africa was not that difficult, because we used the Rotary Club of North Durban. One of their members had a shipping company. He shipped them for nothing. And one of their members was an import agent. He imported them for nothing. I think the total bill was £1,200 for the container and £389 for someone's airfare to Pretoria and Johannesburg and back. So what we've done is we've built a system, if you like, where we get the barrels into the communities. The biggest problem is that we were having them made in the UK. Now we're not having them made in the UK, and the reason for that is nothing. It's just logistics. Now this barrel here is made by Aquaroll, and they're £40 a piece, or £45 a piece. So we don't buy those, but millions of people in this country have got some of these in their garages. I'm sure you know somebody. So in a couple of years' time, we're working on a project where we ask people to give us their old barrels. Right, and we're going to take their old barrels back, sterilise them, repair them if necessary, but we're not going to repair them. We're going to take them to Africa and repair them and employ people. That's the trick. Okay, so we moved on from there, and we went to a new barrel, which is this one here, right, which comes in a cardboard box. The cardboard box is relevant, because when you give someone a cardboard box in Africa, they can do things with a cardboard box that you would die for. And I've got people in Zambia who I gave a cardboard box to 2 years ago, and it's still on their roof. And it starts off, they use it as a storage depot for their clothing because it's clean and dry. And then when it gets to the point where they can't use it anymore, it gets torn, they put it under their bed. So that stops the termites or the ants coming through. And then when it gets to the point where it's a little bit rough, right, they slide it under their what we would call what do they call that? Hay roof. So, but this barrel here, we had this made, and it's got very quick story. The man who made these went broke. Simple as that. And I found out, well, the man who was making them. The man, I rang him up and I said, "You've gone broke. What's happened?" And he said, "Well, the people that were making them for me, right? I owe them a lot of money." And I said, "Oh, who are they?" And he said, "Well, they're in Blackburn." So I said, "Oh, okay. Can I speak to them?" He said, "If you want to." So I rang up these people in Blackburn and I said, "Can I have some barrels?" And they said, "You can." And it was used to be called Pyramid, but now it's called Rotary. And I had an email from Rotary International at Chicago that said, "You can't use the word Rotary on a Rotary barrel." And I wrote back and said, "Why not? Why can't I? Rotary wristwatches are using Rotary, and you haven't got the copyright on the name, have you?" And they said, "No, but it infers that it's to do with Rotary." I said, "No, it infers that it rotates." So they let me get away with it, and they've been really kind. So we moved to the second stage, which was this barrel. We were taking these barrels. They come out at about £22 each to buy from in Blackburn with VAT and so on. I don't get a discount because I'm shipping them overseas. They get that discount on the VAT if they ship them, and we weren't registered anyway, so as a charity. So we decided to buy these. So we buy these off them at £22. The problem again is that when you buy something in Blackburn, it takes a month to make. You've then got to store them. I've got to buy 500 at a time, and I have to pay in advance. Right? They don't miss a trick, these people. Okay. So coming back to NPAC in Nottingham, who've been helping us ship them, what they did was they gave me space to store them. So I've got the barrels, I've got somewhere to store them, I manufacture them, I pay for them, I'm £10,000 light, if you like, okay, and I'm waiting for projects. Or am I waiting for projects? I always wait for a project. I don't fulfill a project because sometimes when you make a promise and you don't keep it, so I never make a promise. So we started looking for projects, and we found that Kenya was a great source of projects. So I went to Kenya and I met the United Nations and the United Nations Development Programme, and I did a deal with them where they would take our barrels and they would distribute them to their projects around East Africa. The problem again was money. Right? When you work with the UN, you have to have a procurement number. You have to. It's so complicated, and they didn't like the idea of me giving them away. They didn't. They hated it because they say that's not sustainable, and it's not sustainable. So when you've been carrying your water for 6 miles every morning, who cares about sustainability? Nobody. They just want a barrel. No one's ever sent one back. Trust me. Okay. So when I got to Africa, I realised that this barrel needs to be made almost in situ. So I spent about 3 weeks there, and I met a number of manufacturers of those great big water tanks that you see all over Africa. Some are good quality, some are not so good quality. But what I ended up doing was a deal with a company called Kent Taylors. And this is what they produced me. They produced a barrel like this. Okay, this is the barrel they produced. And it's actually stronger than that one. And people keep saying to me, well, if you have it made in Africa, it must be half the price. It's actually not. Okay, this barrel, to produce this barrel, before at the gate, is $37, 37 American dollars. Pound's gone down, so these are getting expensive. But when someone calls me, as they did 2 weeks ago, if you know a man called Bernie Hollywood, he's all over the internet. He rang me up and he said, can I have some barrels for my scheme down in and wherever it is? And I said, yeah. And he said, how? I suppose it'd take ages to get there, would it? And I said, yeah, it'll probably take you 4 days. And he said, wow, how can you do that? 4 days? It's like 500 miles from Nairobi. And I said, I just put it on a bus. I love Nairobi because you can just put things on a bus. I have a lady called Barbara Parkins, and she runs a thing called, I can't remember the name of it now. She's an Australian lady. She lives on the Masai Mara, and she's in the middle of, absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And you've probably seen it on my Facebook page. And she keeps putting up, I give her 1 barrel, and she takes it to church and has it blessed. I had another lot take, to Maru, and I mean, I can't go through it for everyone because they're everywhere. But Alan Wollstonecroft, some of you may know him. He took the lot into Sierra Leone. So the thing about this barrel, and if you would look at the website or the Facebook today, you will see a lady called Victoria Njagana. And what she does is she works for the charity. I pay her a salary. Initially, she worked for nothing, but it got very difficult for her to do a job and then do it. And because Kenya is so big, right, when she had to go or I asked her to go and do something, it may be 400 kilometers away. She had to take 2 days, 3 days off work. Her boss wasn't very happy. So in the end, she gave up her job and I pay her a salary. And for the charity paid her a salary. If we don't have enough money, then, we get it covered. So it's not a problem. But, quite at the moment, we're quite fluid. We're not running out of money. And this weekend, she went down to a place called Majori, and she does a barrel program, which is giving out barrel. She does a health training program. So she teaches them how to use the barrel. She teaches them how to look after it. She teaches them what to do with the water when it comes out of it and how not to waste it, how to wash that, just to wash their hands. They're not all aware of how to wash their hands. So she teaches them all that. We then moved into, I'm sure you've all heard of Aquabox. So we moved into water filters. So we give water filters. I get them from Aquabox or from Griffith, and we give these away as well if we've got enough money. So when we go into a community and we find that we give them one of these barrels or a dozen barrels or 5 dozen barrels or whatever it is, and they go off to the swamp and they're just bringing back dirty water, what we've really done is we've saved them a little bit of effort, but we haven't saved their lives. So we ensure that they've got these. And we're now moving into community filters. The trouble with these is they're quite expensive. And I think these are, I think John sells them for £37, which is about $52, $54, and that's from here. So we're looking at ways of finding these, getting these to Africa in bulk, and then drawing them off of a wholesale amount. But Uganda has just come up this week, or a couple of weeks ago, and again, when I get every day, I get maybe 10 requests for roll out the barrel. Can we have some barrels, please? They send me pictures that make me die and cry. And even, you know, I haven't become hardened. That's it. I was fearful that I would get this fatigue that you get. I haven't become hardened at all. I've become, if anything, I've become more, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? But I just feel that, but I feel frustrated sometimes when I can't do something. When I know that, you know, one of these would solve their problem, and I can't do it. This barrel changes lives. There's a lady called Jane, and she works at World Vision in Zambia, and she's worked there for 30 years, and we gave her 50 barrels recently, or a little recently, and she wrote me a letter, and she said, I have been doing this job for 30 years, and that was the most beautiful, enlightening experience I have ever had when I gave those women those barrels, and I saw the difference it made to their lives that day, not even next year or tomorrow. We had a program, a short program with Water Aid, but that fell apart because Water Aid, like a lot of big charities, they have their own projects, they have their own rationale, they don't like to share. And but we're getting there. I just, you know, I was a little bit annoyed and aggravated initially, but gradually we're getting there. We're working with various different people. So what happened is that we've now moved from not just the water barrel, although it's called roll out the barrel, but we moved from water barrels to water filtration. We're now looking at sanitation. We're looking at female, menstrual problems, which are caused by. So we just sent 150 barrels to Malawi. The reason we sent them to Malawi was because somebody had a program where they were making renewable pads for women. They had the women making the pads, but they needed to be washed properly, and they couldn't collect the water. So now we gave them 150 barrels to collect water. So now they can make the pads, and they can then clean them and dry them and whatever. A simple thing like that you and I don't think about is I was watching a little video which a friend of mine sent me, and it was the women washing their clothes by the river, and they washed their clothes and they beat them on the stones, and then they laid them in the sun to dry. A simple thing like a rotary line, I didn't even think about it, but a rotary line is so simple. You stick it up, you can put all your, but they leave it on the side there, and they get infested by, ants and all sorts of termites who eat their clothing and whatever. So a simple thing like a rotary line. So my theme is Rotary, but Rotary, us Rotary. My ambition recently has been to go into a community and find out the problem. And I'm not one of those white Anglo-Saxon Europeans who goes in and says, I can see your problem, I can solve it. What I do is I go in and I say to my friends who are there, what is their problem? And then they go and discuss it. They come back with the problem. I then offer them a solution, which they very often don't accept, but they come up with their own solution. And the solution sometimes is not just a barrel. So, for instance, I gave one of these to a lady in Makakos. And when I went back to see her, I'm not one of those guys who dances with women either. When they go along and you see these stupid, don't get me wrong, I hope none of you done it. But when you go to Africa and you see these guys with the sandals and the shorts and they're all dancing like, and they look silly, quite frankly. So I went there and I said to the lady, Margaret, I said, look, I'm sorry, Margaret, but it's just not my bag. They were singing and dancing and it was beautiful. So she said, well, can we all give you a kiss? So they all gave me a kiss. The last lady that gave me a kiss, she kissed me smack on the lips. And I said, why? You going, Martin? Yeah, take care. She kissed me smack on the lips. Okay, and I said, why? And because we gave her one of these, and what she'd been doing is she'd been clearing the water, and she'd been putting it in bottles and selling it to the local hotel. And from that, she had managed to start a small business. I didn't even know about it. We've got another boy called Kennedy, where we gave him a barrel. He was autistic, couldn't carry his water at all. Because of the handle, he can put his arm around the handle, he can collect the water and pull it. And on his first journey home, this is 18 months ago, someone stopped him and said, "Oh, Kennedy, could I have some of that water?" And he said, "Yeah, okay." So he gave her the water, no thought about payment. And she said, "Well, if you do that for me every day," she said, "I'll give you whatever it is." So gradually he built up a little round. And that little boy Kennedy, who was 12 then, he's 14 now, 15 now, right? In 18 months, right, he educated himself, he paid for his own education, because he was an orphan. He bought himself a goat. Not just a goat, but a he-goat, right? Now, for me, that doesn't mean much, maybe not to you. But for someone to own a he-goat, right, it's like, it elevates them in society, that they get respect. So from one barrel, this young boy Kennedy, he's got two now, but he built a business, and I wasn't even aware of it. So this is the ingenuity of these people. You just give them the opportunity, and they grasp it, and they deal with it in a way that you and I, probably wouldn't. There is another barrel you may have heard of called the hippo barrel. Have you heard of the hippo barrel?
Yeah.
Right. Basically, the hippo barrel is the same as this, but it's 100 litres, right, which is 100 kilos. I defy any 3 or 4 year old or even a woman to carry or pull 100 kilos. It's like massive. And I actually went to South Africa and I saw Grant Gibbs, who runs it, and I said, "Why don't you make them smaller?" He said, no, he said, "I know what I'm doing." So I just let him do it. So that's what I do. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to change the lives of people, right? And so that it gives them, what it does is it empowers women. And my last thing I'm going to tell you about is I met a lady called Helen Clark. And Helen Clark is currently up to be the General Secretary of the United Nations. Whether she makes it or not, I don't know. But every now and again in life, you meet someone who changes your life. And she changed my life, because what she did was, she knew what I was trying to do, but she didn't know that I think she thought that I didn't really know why I was doing it. And when she told me that, what was happening in the United Nations and how she was trying to empower women, 52% of the world is women. So they should have 52% of the responsibility, 52% of the blame, and 52% of the benefit. That's the rule, okay? So what we try to do is we empower women. I'm a member of a group called He for She, right, which is anyone can join. It's just a hashtag. You don't have to, you call me I pay, but you don't have to, right? But the problem is there are so many projects. There are just so many projects for people to support, and no one has joined the dots up. So I'm going to tell you another little anecdote. This is about the Rotary Club of Roeborough and a Rotary Club in the north of England. I can't remember who it was. They met in a village in Zambia, and the bloke from the north said, "Hey," he said, "look at that." He said, "All them lovely books what we collected, and we sent them down. These kids are there. Oh, they're lovely." And the bloke from Roeborough, literacy aid, he said, "No." So he said, "You're wrong." He said, West Country accent. He said, because I come from there. He said, "They're from us." And the bloke said, "Oh no." He said, "That definitely our books." He said, "You can tell." He said, "There's noddy and big ears," and he said, "No, we said noddy and big ears as well." And what was happening was, right, that two clubs in this country were sending stuff, the same stuff automatically, to the same village. And what the villagers were doing is were burning them, right, to boil their water. That is terrible. So I have a project which is called Joining Up the Dots. And this week in our Rotary magazine, you'll see, I think it was the Rotary Club of Brackley have raised some money, and they set up a water project in Makakos. I've been working in Makakos for 18 months. I didn't even know they were there. So the trick is that Rotary needs to work together, because I think we would be much more efficient if we knew what each other was doing. And there are projects all over the country, all over the world, right, where we're all involved, but we're all involved as individuals. So I'm not a great believer in me having a project. It's a project. And I will tell you this, I went to a club in the north of England, just outside Leeds, and a bloke stood up and he said, "Hey, right, lad." He said, "Well, what's to stop me sending barrels myself then?" And I said, "Nothing at all, mate." I said, "Here's the address of the manufacturer, do it."
Yes.
But that's how I feel. It doesn't matter who sends them, it's not my project, this is about a humanitarian process of which I just happen to be involved at the moment. I'm 68 years old, I'm not going to live forever. Okay, I've got Luke. Anyone know Luke Addison?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Luke Addison is a trustee. He's also the president of Rotaract, so he's bringing Rotaract on board. I didn't make him a trustee because he was Rotaract, because he was a trustee before that. But so his generation will take over this project, because I did want to leave something, a kind of legacy that could be used. So essentially, that's what we do. The barrels are now costing $37 each, but we call it 50 because time you ship them, that's what it comes to. Shipping is quite expensive in Africa. And at the moment, one of the things we're doing is I had the barrels made in Nairobi. I pay in advance again because they don't trust anybody, but I trust them because they've never let me down. What they've done is they've developed the barrel from this original prototype into something far more utilitarian and more robust, and it should last 10 years. 10 years easily. This barrel that I've got here with the orange one was made in 1974, I think it was. I've got one in my warehouse which was made in 1953. I know we don't use it to the same degree, but this barrel goes up and down hills. It goes over bumps. You can lift it up the side of gorges with a bit of rope. It's not, and once it's on reasonable ground, the youngest of young can move it, and they move it very easily. We're now setting up a new thing called it's got to be a barrel library, if you want to call it, where we will do, because we can't supply everybody everywhere, we're going to put 30 barrels into a small village, and we're going to allow the people to borrow the barrel. We're not going to rent it to them, we're going to let them borrow it, okay? But their responsibility is to bring it back clean and tidy. And then we'll have a water monitor. And in the place called Tatiaveti, where I personally gave out 300 barrels to a community, we set up 2 water monitors. We gave them 40 of these and 300 barrels. And the idea is that the water monitor goes around and checks the pumps and he checks the water barrels, and he gets paid. It's minuscule. It's 10 cents a time or something. But before that, he was unemployed. So it's so the barrel is just a means to an end. Okay. And my dream, and I'm not normally a dreamer, but I was talking to Eve yesterday. One of the things I would like to do is I would like to bring this into Rotary as a Rotary project, because I think it meets all the criteria that Rotary requires. What it doesn't do is it doesn't have this sustainability. Again, it comes back to sustainability. And I never applied for a Rotary grant or a global grant, because the problem with them, from my point of view, is that by the time you've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's, it can be 9, even 15 months. We actually had a project here on the Isle of Wight which took 11 months to get approval of. Right? By that time, the people I'm trying to help are dead.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I don't agree with it. I'm just saying sometimes it's not practical to apply for this global grant. One of the things I am doing now is I'm moving into, when I move to a village, I see a village as an entity. So that village isn't about water, it's not about sanitation, it's not about AIDS or whatever. So we're working in a place called Kazozi in Uganda, where we've taken the village of 1,000 people and we're looking at their needs now. So the first thing we had to do was there are 1,000 people there, women, right, with children. Not one of them had malaria net. Okay? They're collecting their water from swamps, but not one had a malaria net. Yeah. So what I've done is I've got my club to sponsor the first part of malaria nets. And the nice thing about Roll Out the Barrel is I don't sit on the money. Someone gives me £1,000 a day, I've spent it by Friday, and I deliver by the following Thursday. Yeah. So Doreen, who works for us now in Uganda, she's delivering. She delivered 300 last week, 200 more this week than area nets. If you look on the website again, you'll see that there are people there crying, and I'm sorry, I can't help it here, but they're crying because no one gives them anything. They have to fight for everything. So I like Aquabox. I don't know if any of you like Aquabox, but I love Aquabox. Yeah. I think Soda Box serves a purpose, but Aquabox does something more for me. And I gave Aquabox 10,000 hand towels to put inside and that's what they're still doing them now. And it wasn't me personally. People give me stuff all day long. So I just give it to other people. But I gave them 10,000 towels, and they gave me some water pumps, which I then, and they actually arrived in Nairobi yesterday. which is kind of cool. So they'll be taken down in about 2 weeks to a group of ladies who've been collecting water for about one of the things that we have found, which is when I started off, I had this ideal of giving them to the women and the children. When I go down there, you find that the people who need them most, and the women who carry water very often will tell you this, is, can you give it to that old lady over there? She's 82. Can you give it to that old man? Or so we end up we give a lot to people who are disabled, who are not able, or unable, if you like. And if you look again on today, I think it was posted, they gave one to a man who's got a tricycle, and he had polio, and he consequently he couldn't collect his water, so they tied it onto the back of his bike. So it's really lovely just to watch these things happening. So the inventiveness of these people is just untrue.
Amazing, yeah.
So that's it. I think the object of the exercise is basically for 30, I still charge them out at 30 quid. And if people donate, because people like to know, like to equate with their money with whatever it's done. So we still call them £30. If it's a bit more, we finance that. If it's a bit less, I've got a couple of philanthropists, Rotarians, who've been very kind and given us, quite substantial sums of money. We've got a project in Matt Purcell, Matt Purcell, presumably. He's quite from Paddington Group. We're doing a project there into the Ivory Coast. We've got the barrels, but we can't get them into a container. So, this is another problem. One of the things I would love to do, as an aside, is on the website, RIBI website, what I would like to have is a list where any of us can access who are members, and through the members forum, and just go onto that list and see who's delivering what to where, who's got a project where and what. So A, you don't double up, and B, you can work together.
Absolutely.
So if someone was sending project stuff to the Ivory Coast, which I'm sure they are, but I don't know who they are. So that would be another, and I have put it forward to Amanda, but it never kind of got off her desk. But and I spoke to Chris Sweeney, and he said, speak to Amanda. There you go.
It makes sense. Yeah.
I had Chris Slowcock here yesterday. He's our DG. He's a lovely man, and he's full of ideals and full of ambition for Rotary and what we can and can't do. But the practical thing is that we can't do everything. No. But I think if we work together, we can do so much more. So much more. Yeah. I do appreciate Thurrock Gateway, asking me to come and talk, and I appreciate that you are going to raise money for this. But I would like it that at every club, not just bought a barrel, but it fitted in with the project they've got. Yeah. So they may have a project doing something completely different. Yeah, but if it's in Africa, you can bet your sweet life someone's carrying water. So take 20 barrels off me. Yeah. And you don't even have to pay me 600 quid. I've got a lady in Nottingham who she wanted 100 barrels for a place called Maru, and she didn't have enough money, and she went out and she raised £998, and I said, just send me the £998, and I just sent her 100 barrels. It was just so much easier when she showed me these people. Yeah. So thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adrian, for your time. It's really wonderful to give us your time and your experience. It's a wealth of stuff. Some of the stuff I didn't even know about.
Well,
wonderful.